All right, welcome. Today we're going to talk about the art and beauty of revision. So, we're going to begin with a little centering exercise and then discuss the revision mindset and go down a checklist of just really basic nuts and bolts things that will support you, largely questions you can ask yourself in terms of where your manuscript is and what needs to change and what doesn't need to change. And then I'll offer an exercise that you can do on your own or with a few friends. So to begin, let's just go ahead and take a few conscious breaths together. You can close your eyes. Take a nice deep inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. Do that a few more times. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. And as you sit here, soften through the shoulders, soften through your body, and just give yourself an opportunity to get present. So we're always present, but right now, I invite you to tune into the sensation of the body. So just notice what you feel in your fingers, in your hands and wrists, in your forearms and upper arms, your shoulders, your chest, your stomach. Notice how you feel through the legs, whether your legs feel heavy or light. Tune in to the ankles, the feet, the whole body now. And just take note of how you feel. Not trying to change anything, just really taking this opportunity to listen. Listen to your body. And then shift your attention to your thoughts. What are you thinking about? What thoughts are coming and going? Just watch. It may feel like nothing is coming and going. You may have a to-do list running endlessly. You may just be waiting for this meditation to be over. Whatever it is, just be honest, just watch. We're refining our ability to pay attention, to get precise. And take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth with a sigh. Blink the eyes open. And we'll get into the lecture. So just to set the stage here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that can come up for us when we think about revision traditionally. So sometimes people shy away from the idea that revision can be beautiful and artistic because it can feel just like plain old criticism. Self-criticism, revising based on others' comments. And sometimes if we're revising based on others' comments, somebody we hired or someone we know and we just shared our manuscript with, sometimes the advice can be pretty shoddy and it can be hard to know what advice to take and what advice that we really should not take. Moreover, during this process, for a lot of people, we may feel feelings of inadequacy. I never did get that MFA and it really shows, my commas aren't right, those kinds of things. Conversely, you may get a nice inflated sense of ego and a nice little sense of self-accomplishment, and you'll read back your work and see nothing wrong at all, which I'm going to tell you, if you can read through an entire manuscript and see nothing wrong at all, you probably do have a little bit of an inflated sense of self, but I applaud you, because better that than the alternative. Also, during revision, we may get defensive or just feel like, hey, this is too much work. The fact is, we all need to revise. Those of us who feel good about our work, those of us who are thinking that we never want to look at our rough draft again. If we're working with a draft, it's called a draft for a reason. And kind of talking ourselves out of this process is not helpful. So one way that we can just take a baby step to approach a way of thinking about revision in a little bit more productive manner is to really get focused here and just identify one thing about the manuscript at hand that you believe could make it better, or one thing about your writing in general that you wish you could get better at. So this could be basic grammar, syntax. It could be transitions, or making your characters more dynamic, or not repeating words. It could be sounding more authentic and less like the writers that you admire. So do that fill in the blank and don't overthink it. Just whatever first comes to mind. And we're not looking for a list here, so if there's multiple things coming to mind, just pick the top thing. And we're going to move forward, and we're going to talk about 4 questions that we can ask ourselves as we begin to revise. And by breaking these questions down, it will kind of help us to identify what that top thing is. So if you're not quite sure what you most want to improve, this should help. So first, one of the main things that we need to consider when revising a manuscript is that we are writing this to share it with a reader. So it can be very helpful to read through with as much disconnection as possible. And this is kind of tricking ourselves a little bit. It's not necessarily easy, but I invite you to just put on your reader cap and read as though you are reading someone else's work. Read as though you just picked up this book or this story in the bookstore or at a coffee shop, and you're in a hurry and you're reading and you're trying to decide whether to buy it. Read like you are not you. Read as though you are reading someone else's work. I know I'm repeating myself here, but really try to do this, because in so doing, you will be putting yourself in the reader's shoes. And by putting yourself in the reader's shoes, you're going to better see where maybe you have wasted some space with excess exposition, or perhaps you're losing the interest of a potential reader. So this is step 1. So really just read with this nice, healthy disconnection, trying to be as objective as possible, and just do your best. Step 2 is I call this setting your oven timer. But essentially what this is to break down what you see in the manuscript when you read through from this other person's eyes. Do you see that you are overbaking or underbaking? And generally we veer toward one side or the other as writers. You may find evidence of both in your writing. But overbaking means we're showing off, we're trying too hard. Every sentence is such a weighty piece of art that it really should live on its own. That can be hard to read. So if you're reading through and you're like, wow, I really do think my language is beautiful, but I'm getting lost in these sentences. They're so dense and they're so multifaceted. Perhaps you need to think about maybe how to reposition the piece. Underbaking. So this is impatient writing. This is moving the reader haphazardly through time, taking us from one place to the next, not introducing characters, or introducing characters and then not bringing them back, logic errors, these kinds of things. Keeping in mind that this is really all about pacing, but within pacing, you can find and identify a lot of areas and ways to amplify your writing, or to see where you may be going on a little bit too long in areas, or including sometimes even entire scenes that are not serving the story. And one way to think about this is, yes, is my writing lovely? Is it delivered well? Good, check mark. But is it also efficient and effective? Is every scene and every detail I'm including in some way moving the reader forward along this journey? If yes, good. You're good to go. Number 3, this is a good question or a good thing to explore, and this is how you're moving your reader in time and space. So specifically, and this is a little bit more nuts and bolts, but specifically look at your paragraph breaks, look at your introductory clauses, look at where you're including dates and timestamps. Make sure that your reader is oriented in time. They know when and where they are. And when you're moving around in time, how are you doing so? Are you restating where you're at and what time of day it is or what year it is? And if not, can you in some way do that symbolically through the use of an object or a recurring reference? So these are some really good things to just kind of ask yourself. How am I moving the reader in time? And what devices am I using to do so? And I will say here that sometimes it can be really fantastic to just include the date and time. In my novel, which will be coming out soon, I just include the actual date at the header of every chapter, at least in the beginning, so that I'm orienting the reader, because I have a dual narrative, and it can be very easy when I was reading through as the not me. I realized it could be very, very easy to just not know where you're at the beginning of a chapter, or not get oriented. So I would include the character's name who was narrating as well as the date. And then as it got into a cadence, it became more obvious. So just look to things like that. Make sure that your reader is not getting lost. Okay, and number 4. Beginning and endings. So this is just a really simple thing to do. The first is to look at your beginning and ask yourself, are you beginning at the beginning? Specifically, are you writing your way to an opening? And this is very, very, very often the case. I see this in so many of my clients and students' work, where if you were to actually just take out, say, the first paragraph or the first few paragraphs, or much of the writing in the first few paragraphs, you have an amazing opening. A lot of times we write our way to the opening. So this is always a good question to ask, and just to look at your writing, see if this is a possibility for you. And then examine and explore your ending. What are you ending with? What is the final scene? What is the final image? What is the final idea? What is the emotional resonance that you're leaving your reader with? So just doing a little checkpoint at the beginning, at the end. We've looked at the way that we're moving our reader through time. And we've thought about where our actual writing is under or overbaked, and how we can remedy that. So all of these things are taking our reader by the hand and truly empathizing with them and providing them the best possible story we can. So a final comment here about making revision something of an art and a very beautiful process is to just go through and look at the nuts and bolts, but do so in a way that's not daunting. So looking at modifiers, wordiness, this is something that you can do through different programs. You can actually identify recurring words. You can do a seek and find for ly words. You can do a seek and find for words that you know that you overuse. And as you're going through, you'll see different patterns. And so you can look at ways to make your writing a bit more precise. One of my imprecise habits is to use the word just. And just doesn't generally help out a sentence. I am just sitting here, or I am sitting here. I am just sitting here doesn't really add much in most cases. Sometimes maybe. Sometimes it can be a style call. But just knowing your tells and going through and looking for those things. The other thing I want to say is really, really think about who you share your work with, especially at a somewhat of a rough draft stage. Knowing who you're sharing your work with and what their actual skill level is, would you buy their book, is a good question. If you would, then that's probably a good person to give you feedback. If you would not or have not, then you might want to check out their work, or if they don't have a body of work, at least check out a sample and make sure that you resonate with it. If they're too glowingly gushing over your writing and or too harsh, there's probably not a level of professionalism there. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind the time and space, and just always come back to this idea that as you're revising, you have on your reader cap, not your writer cap. Think about this as an opportunity to really step back from the work, have fun with it. The art of disconnecting from our art. It can be really fun. Okay, so here's an exercise to take with you. So individually, and if you're not part of a writing group, you can, just do this with anybody maybe that you can trade work with or get eyes on your work. But individually first, we'll go all the way back to that first question. And that is to identify what you need to work on the most. And once you have what that is, maybe for you it is transitions, it's time and space. Maybe for you it's efficiency of language. If you do have a writing group, you can make a specific ask. Say, look, I want to get better at orienting my reader in time. And then ask for feedback. Ask for ideas about ways you can do this. And just listen. And don't listen to respond, just listen to listen. Look to your work as a sort of puzzle. Understand where you feel confident and where you don't, and seek advice that's specific. And work on one thing at a time as you revise. I believe that these things will help you. And this process is fun because we get to play reader, we get to take a step back, and we get to evaluate our work and give it the opportunity to truly shine and to truly connect with the many more readers we'll have down the line. So thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful, and write well.